The night shift at the Red Owl gas station had been my quiet dominion for nearly 3 months. It was a lonely sentinel on the interstate, over 20 miles from the nearest town. During the day, the hum of long-haul trucks offered a semblance of life, but from 1 in the morning until dawn, the place felt utterly forgotten, a pocket dimension outside the world's awareness. Tonight, the old analog clock above the counter stuttered past 1:57 a.m. A light drizzle tapped a hesitant rhythm against the windows, and the neon sign above the pumps, a faded red owl, flickered with unsettling irregularity. I was counting the day's sparse earnings in the cash drawer when a different sound pierced the quiet. Footsteps. Not the rumble of an engine, nor the screech of tires. These were human footsteps, slow, deliberate, and undeniably close. My heart, accustomed to the dull throb of the night, gave an unexpected lurch.
He was standing directly beneath the harsh glare of the lamppost above pump number 3. I hadn't seen him arrive. One moment, the lot was empty. The next, he was simply there, materialized from the night itself. He was tall and gaunt, his frame swallowed by a long dark coat that brushed his knees. A wide-brimmed, old-fashioned hat was pulled low, casting his face into an impenetrable shadow. Yet despite the obscurity, I felt an intense certainty. He was looking straight at me. His gaze, even unseen, was a palpable weight pressing against the glass. My eyes swept the empty parking lot. No vehicle, no car door ajar. Just the man, utterly still, a monochrome silhouette against the muted glow of the station lights, impervious to the drizzle. A tremor of unease snaked down my spine. This wasn't right. Every instinct screamed at me to stay behind the locked door, but the job required customer service.
I forced a professional composure and activated the external intercom, my voice a little louder than necessary. "Sir," I called out, the sound echoing unnervingly. "Do you need gas, or perhaps something from inside the store?" Silence. He didn't stir, didn't acknowledge my question. He remained frozen, a statue carved from shadows and rain. A long moment stretched, taut and suffocating. Just as I was about to repeat my question, a slow, deliberate movement broke his stillness. His right arm, encased in his heavy coat, lifted slowly, his gloved finger pointed unmistakably towards the illuminated glass doors. The implication was clear. He wanted to come in. Against every fiber of my being, against the primal fear that was now a cold knot in my stomach, I knew I had to open the door. With a reluctant sigh, I unlatched the heavy security door, the click of the lock a surprisingly loud punctuation mark.
The old brass chime above the entrance, a relic from a bygone era, gave a weak, protesting jingle as the door swung inward. It was a lonely, forlorn sound, the only audible disruption to the profound stillness that had settled around us. The man stepped inside. He moved with a peculiar, almost gliding motion, his coat making no rustle, his footsteps barely audible on the tiled floor. As he crossed the threshold, a distinct scent followed him. Not the fresh smell of rain, nor the faint tang of gasoline. This was something else entirely. It was the scent of old metal, of forgotten rust and damp earth, a heavy, pervasive aroma that reminded me of a long, sealed cellar finally opened after decades. It was cold, cloying, and unsettlingly persistent, clinging to the air around him like a second skin. He stopped directly in front of the counter. His head, still obscured by the wide brim of his hat, remained angled downward, keeping his face hidden.
The silence stretched between us again, thick and heavy. From within the folds of his coat, he produced something and placed it on the counter. It was an old silver coin, tarnished and heavily scratched, its intricate markings almost completely worn away. It looked like something unearthed from an archaeological dig, utterly out of place in the sterile, fluorescent glow of the gas station convenience store. The dull thud it made as it met the plastic laminate felt disproportionately loud, a bizarre anchor in the surreal encounter. His voice, when it came, was a low, guttural rasp, like stones grinding together, slow and deliberate, as if he hadn't used it in a very long time. "For me, a bottle of water." I reached for a standard plastic bottle of purified water from the chilled display behind me, my movements stiff, almost robotic. I placed it on the counter beside the ancient coin. He didn't pick it up immediately.
Instead, his gaze, still hidden beneath his hat, seemed fixed on the mundane label, scrutinizing the blue and white packaging as if it held forgotten memories. Then, without shifting his gaze from the bottle, he asked, his voice a dry whisper that seemed to absorb all ambient sound. "Do you know what time it is now?" My voice, surprisingly steady, responded, "Almost 2 in the morning." He nodded almost imperceptibly. "Still in time." The phrase hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications, leaving an icy residue on my skin. Some questions were better left unasked, some mysteries best left unexplored, especially at 2 in the morning in a forgotten gas station on the edge of nowhere. My hand hovered over the cash register, ready to input the purchase, but a strange apprehension kept me from touching the coin. My hand, still hovering over the cash register, felt a peculiar stiffness. The old silver coin, dull and ancient, lay on the counter like a forgotten relic.
The man waited, silent and unmoving, a dark monolith in the flickering fluorescent light. I finally pushed the apprehension aside, telling myself it was just an odd customer, a lonely traveler passing through. With a conscious effort, I turned my back to him, reaching for the change drawer beneath the counter, my fingers brushing against the cool metal of the coins. It was only a second, a fleeting moment when my gaze was diverted, but when I turned back, the silver coin was gone. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the spot where it had been, then swept my eyes across the counter, searching for it. It wasn't there. Instead, nestled precisely where the coin had lain, was something else. A key. Not a modern key, but one forged from heavy, dark iron, rusted and pitted with age. It looked like it belonged to a dungeon or a forgotten chest. Attached to its ornate head was a small, oblong metal tag, equally old and tarnished, on which the number 13 had been crudely yet deeply etched. A cold prickle ran up my spine. This wasn't an exchange. This was something far stranger, far more deliberate. My voice, when I finally found it, was barely a whisper, a strained, disbelieving sound. What is this?" I asked, pointing a trembling finger at the key, unable to bring myself to touch it. For the first time since he entered, the man lifted his head. The brim of his hat, which had so effectively concealed his face, now revealed it in the stark, unforgiving light. The air around me grew suddenly heavy, thick with a chill that wasn't from the night or the rain. All the blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and lightheaded. My heart, which had been beating an erratic rhythm, now seemed to seize in my chest, a cold, hard knot. His eyes. They weren't eyes at all. There was no white, no iris, no pupil. Just 2 abyssal hollows, like pits carved into his skull, devoid of any light or reflection. They were tunnels, staring into an unknown, unfathomable darkness, utterly bottomless and consuming. It was like looking into a void, a place where light simply ceased to exist, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that threatened to unravel my very being. Every fiber of my existence screamed in terror, a primal, wordless shriek. His rasping voice cut through the terrifying silence, a sound that seemed to echo from the depths of those dark sockets, devoid of all warmth or human inflection. "Don't make me come back." The words hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement that felt less like a threat and more like a dire warning. Before I could process the terror, before my frozen limbs could even twitch, he turned. His movements were fluid, silent, almost spectral. He made no sound as he walked towards the door, his long coat swishing, barely perceptibly.
The old chime above the entrance remained silent, eerily so, as he passed through the threshold. He simply vanished back into the drizzling night, leaving behind only the lingering scent of metal and damp earth, and an unbearable, suffocating silence. I stood there, paralyzed, my gaze fixed on the empty doorway. The flickering neon light of the red owl sign outside seemed to mock my shattered reality. The rain continued its soft, relentless patter, a mundane backdrop to the cosmic horror I had just witnessed. It was several long, agonizing seconds before my breath hitched, a gasp tearing its way from my constricted lungs. My legs felt like jelly, my hands were shaking uncontrollably, and a cold sweat plastered my uniform to my skin. On the counter, cold and heavy and undeniably real, lay the rusty key, its number 13, a stark, unsettling reminder of the unearthly encounter. The second he was gone, my frozen paralysis shattered into a frantic jumble of motion. My hands, still trembling violently, fumbled for the lock, slamming the heavy glass door shut and twisting the deadbolt with a desperate, audible click. The chime, which had remained silent during his exit, now rattled aggressively with the force of my action, its jingle a jarring cacophony in the unnerving silence he had left behind. I pressed my back against the door, breath coming in ragged gasps, my eyes darting wildly around the empty store, half expecting him to reappear. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, any explanation for what had just transpired. A prank? A hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation? But the key, heavy and real on the counter, screamed otherwise. My gaze fell upon it, a grim, undeniable anchor to the surreal encounter. "No," I whispered, the sound raw and hoarse. "This can't be happening." My legs, still weak and unsteady, nevertheless propelled me forward. I stumbled around the counter, my eyes never leaving the key, as if it might vanish like the coin. It lay there, immutable, a dark promise of something deeply wrong. Ignoring the metallic tang of fear that coated my tongue, I snatched it up. Its cold, rough surface felt ancient, the rust flaking slightly onto my palm. The number 13 on the tag seemed to burn into my skin. My mind, desperate for any semblance of control or proof, immediately turned to the security cameras. Every corner of the Red Owl was under surveillance, a comforting blanket of electronic eyes. If I had imagined it, if I was losing my mind, the cameras would show me. They would offer objective truth, a clear, undeniable refutation of the impossible. I dashed to the back room, a cramped space filled with shelves of supplies and the flickering monitors of the CCTV system. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My fingers, still clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled with the mouse, navigating the interface. I rewound the footage, my eyes glued to the screen. I set the playback to begin at 1:50 a.m., about 10 minutes before he had appeared.
The screen showed the gas station forecourt, dimly lit, the rain a shimmering curtain. Time ticked by on the timestamp displayed in the corner. 1:55 a.m., 1:56 a.m., 1:57 a.m. My own figure was visible behind the counter, my head bowed as I counted the money, completely oblivious. Then 1:58 a.m. I watched myself straighten up, look towards the door, then call out through the intercom. My lips moved, but the screen was silent, a ghostly pantomime. I saw myself pause, then reluctantly open the door. But the forecourt was empty. The screen showed an empty stretch of asphalt, the rain falling on nothing but concrete. There was no tall, gaunt man in a black coat, no shadowy figure beneath the lamppost. Nothing. My blood ran cold. I watched in horrified disbelief as my digital self continued the charade.
I saw myself turn from the counter, then spin back around, an expression of visible shock contorting my features. I watched myself staring at an empty counter, then quickly reaching for something that wasn't there. Then I watched myself turn and dash into the back room, just as
feed. The key, wrapped tightly in a paper towel, was tucked deep in my pocket, its metallic weight a constant, chilling reminder. I didn't dare touch it again, yet couldn't bring myself to throw it away. As dawn approached, painting the sky in a weak, watery gray, a different kind of relief washed over me.
the first faint chirps of birds, the distant rumble of an early morning truck, these mundane sounds were a welcome return to the familiar world. When my replacement, an elderly woman named Martha, who always smelled faintly of lavender and stale coffee, finally arrived, I nearly collapsed with gratitude. I mumbled something about a long night, avoiding eye contact, desperate to escape. I didn't go straight home. The image of those dark, empty eye sockets, the rasping voice, the key, it all replayed in an endless loop in my mind. I needed answers, or at least some confirmation that I hadn't simply conjured this nightmare from exhaustion. The key in my pocket felt like a burning ember, demanding attention. My first thought was Mr. Henderson, the station owner. He was a gruff, practical man, a relic himself, who had owned the Red Owl for decades. If anyone knew about strange occurrences or the history of this isolated stretch of highway, it would be him. I drove directly to his small, cluttered office in the back of the Red Owl property, knocking hesitantly on the door, my heart still thrumming with a nervous rhythm. He grunted a welcome, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose as he wrestled with a stack of invoices. I swallowed hard, choosing my words carefully. I recounted the entire bizarre encounter, omitting only the details of the man's terrifying eyes, trying to make it sound as rational as possible. A strange customer, a mislaid coin, a swapped item. I described the key in detail, its rusty iron, the crude 13 etched on the tag. I even pulled it out, still wrapped in its paper towel, and placed it on his desk. Mr. Henderson stopped his work. He slowly pushed his spectacles up his nose, peering at the key. His face, usually ruddy and impassive, grew visibly pale. The lines around his mouth deepened, and his gaze sharpened, no longer merely dismissive. His eyes, fixed on the key, held a depth of knowledge and a palpable fear that chilled me to the bone. He didn't touch it. "You shouldn't have taken that," he said, his voice low and tight, devoid of his usual bluster. His fingers, gnarled with age, trembled slightly as he pointed at the key, but kept a respectful distance. "You absolutely should not have touched it." The gravity in his tone was unmistakable. It wasn't a scolding. It was a warning. My stomach clenched. "What is it, Mr. Henderson? Do you know where it came from?" He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of years. He leaned back in his creaky chair, his eyes distant, as if looking into the past. "This red owl," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't always just a gas station. Back in the day, the property included a small motel just a few miles down the road. It's abandoned now, dilapidated, boarded up, but it used to be part of the same business, same ownership." The Red Owl Motel. My mind raced, connecting the dots. "Room 13, I asked, my voice barely a thread. He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the key. Room 13 was always problematic. Superstitious stuff, you know. But then, in '94, that's when we sealed it off. For good." He paused, the silence stretching tautly between us. The air in the small office seemed to grow heavy, thick with untold history. "A night shift employee, just like you," he continued, his voice barely audible. "He worked here at the station. Young fellow, quiet. One night, he called in from room 13, said he was having trouble, said he was seeing things, said he needed help." My blood ran cold. I swallowed, the sound loud in my ears. "What happened?" No one answered the phone. Mr. Henderson said, his voice laced with an old regret. "The line was dead that night. Storm must have knocked it out. By the time someone checked on him the next morning, he was gone. Found him in room 13. He'd hung himself." My mind reeled. The details clicked into place with horrifying precision. A night shift employee, calling the station at 2 a.m., no one answering. Room 13. The man's final words, "Don't make me come back." He wasn't talking about the gas station. He was talking about something far more ancient, far more personal. A chilling possibility, impossible, yet terrifyingly real, began to take root in the darkest corners of my mind. The key on the desk, the key he had given me, was not just a relic. It was an invitation, or a curse, and it was meant for me. The revelation from Mr. Henderson hit me with the force of a physical blow. The small, cluttered office suddenly felt claustrophobic, the air thick with the unspoken tragedy of decades past. The rusty key in the desk, once a mere curiosity, now pulsed with a sinister energy, a direct link to a tormented history. My initial terror, a raw, instinctual fear, began to morph into a deeper, more profound dread. This wasn't just a strange encounter. It was a connection, a passing of the torch in a grim, silent ritual. I looked at Mr. Henderson, his face etched with a regret that had clearly haunted him for years. He called at 2 a.m., I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, just like when the man appeared to me. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a shared understanding of the uncanny. He was looking for help, Mr. Henderson murmured, his voice heavy. He thought someone would answer, but the line was dead, and no one went to him. The implications were stark and chilling. The man, the apparition with the hollow eyes, wasn't just a random spirit. He was the former night shift attendant, eternally trapped, eternally seeking the help that never came. And I, by some twisted cosmic alignment, had become his next target, his next conduit, his next attempt to break free from his gruesome loop. The bottle of water, the silver coin, the key, they were all part of a desperate, unholy transaction. A wave of nausea washed over me. I wanted to scream, to run, to deny it all. But the cold, hard reality of the key and Mr. Henderson's grim confirmation made denial impossible. My hands trembled again, uncontrollably. I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't spend another night at Red Owl. Not after this. Not ever again. I can't, I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. Mr. Henderson, I can't work here anymore. I have to quit. He didn't argue. He simply looked at me with a weary understanding. A man who had seen too much of the strange undercurrents of this isolated place. I understand, he said, his voice softer now. Just leave the key. Don't take it with you. I stared at the key. A part of me wanted comply, to sever this terrifying connection. But another, more primal instinct told me it was too late. He had given it to me. He had chosen me.
And his final, guttural warning, "Don't make me come back," echoed ominously in my mind. What if leaving the key was exactly what he didn't want? What if it meant he would come back, not just to the station, but to me? My hand, as if acting independently, reached for the key. I picked it up, feeling its cold, rusty weight, the number 13 now feeling like a brand. I think I have to keep it, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper, just in case. Mr. Henderson didn't press the issue. He simply sighed, a sound of resignation. "Be careful, son," he warned, his voice low and solemn. "Some things are better left undisturbed." I left the Red Owl that morning, not just quitting a job, but fleeing a nightmare. I drove away, the rising sun casting long, mocking shadows behind me, the key heavy in my pocket. I tried to convince myself that once I put enough distance between myself and that God-forsaken gas station, it would all fade, become a bizarre memory. I would wake up from this nightmare. I spent the day in a haze, unable to eat, unable to focus. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, I would wake up from this nightmare. I spent the day in a haze, unable to eat, unable to focus. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt hollow, exposed. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window sent a jolt of terror through me. I kept the lights on, the television blaring, desperate to drown out the growing silence in my mind, the terrifying echo of that empty gaze. As evening fell, a gnawing anxiety began to replace the initial shock. The world outside grew dark, and with it, my dread deepened. My eyes kept darting to the clock. Every minute that ticked by brought me closer to that unholy hour, to 1:57 a.m. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that this wasn't over. The man had warned me not to make him come back, but he hadn't said he wouldn't come back anyway. I paced my small apartment, a frantic, caged animal. I pulled the blinds tight, locked the door, pushed a chair against it for good measure.
Irrational, perhaps, but it offered a fleeting illusion of safety. The key still rested in my pocket, a constant, irritating presence. I tried to ignore it, to forget about it, but its weight was a magnetic pull, a connection I couldn't sever. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, to abandon the strange task it implied. Then, just as the digital clock on my bedside table flipped from 1:56 to 1:57 a.m., the silence of my apartment was shattered. The shrill, insistent ring of my phone sliced through the oppressive quiet, making me jump, a cry catching in my throat. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs, a cold wave of dread washing over me. The caller ID glowed with 2 words that instantly froze my blood. Red Owl Gas Station. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, hovered inches from the device. The phone continued to ring, a relentless, piercing sound, each vibration a direct assault on my frayed nerves. It rang 4 times, 5, 6. On the 7th ring, it stopped. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise, a void where the terror had just been. A cold sweat plastered my clothes to my skin. I stood frozen, my eyes glued to the dark screen, waiting for the next horror. It came, not through the phone, but from outside. A subtle flicker of movement caught my eye through the gap in the blinds, a dark shape against the dim glow of the street lamp directly opposite my apartment window. Slowly, carefully, as if moving in a dream, I crept towards the window. I parted the blinds just enough to peer out, one eye pressed to sliver of glass. And there he was, standing perfectly still, beneath the weak orange glow of the street lamp, was the man, the tall, gaunt figure in the long black coat and wide-brimmed hat. He was looking up, directly at my window, at me. His arm lifted, slowly, deliberately, into the light.
In his hand, unmistakable even from this distance, was the unopened bottle of water I had given him. And, clutched in his other hand, unmistakable even from this distance, was the unopened bottle of water I had given him. And, clutched in his other hand, reflecting the street lamp's eerie glow with a dull metallic sheen, was the rusty iron key. The number 13 seemed to burn into the night. A silent scream tore through my throat, unheard, unheeded. He had come back, and he had brought my key with him. The sight of him standing there under my window, so far from the desolate interstate, shattered the last fragments of my composure. It wasn't a nightmare anymore. It was real, inescapable, and had followed me home. The unopened bottle of water and the key he held were grotesque trophies, evidence of a connection I desperately wished to sever, but couldn't. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the relentless march of terror. I recoiled from the window, stumbling backward, tripping over my own feet, barely catching myself before I fell.
Every instinct screamed for me to hide, to pretend I wasn't home, to somehow make him disappear. but the chilling certainty that he knew I was there, that he had chosen this moment, this place, to manifest, paralyzed me. I stood in the middle of my living room, my apartment suddenly feeling like a glass cage, utterly exposed. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping in my chest. I stared at my phone, still resting on the table, its screen dark now, no longer displaying the haunting Red Owl gas station caller ID. But the call had been real, and he was real. The rational part of my mind, fighting a losing battle, tried to construct some plausible scenario. How did he know where I lived? How could he appear and disappear like that? But those questions felt trivial, meaningless, in the face of his impossible presence. He wasn't bound by the rules of this world.
The key in my pocket, the one he had given me, suddenly felt scalding hot. It was a mirror, a twisted reflection of the one he held outside, a tangible link that pulsed with an unseen energy. I snatched it out, staring at the rusty metal, the number 13 seeming to mock me. What did he want? What did "don't make me come back" truly mean? And why had he returned the key to me, even as he held another? Or was it the same key, somehow moving between our hands, transcending space and time? The memory of Mr. Henderson's words echoed in my mind. He was looking for help. No one went to him. A chilling thought began to form, pressing through the layers of my fear. What if the key wasn't curse, but a plea? What if he wasn't here to harm me, but to finally receive the assistance he never got? The notion was terrifying, yet it offered a faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of agency. If he wanted help, perhaps I could give it. But help with what? And how?
My gaze drifted back to the window, the faint glow of the street lamp illuminating the curtain. He was still there. I knew it, waiting. My legs, still weak, forced me to move towards it again, drawn by a morbid curiosity, a desperate need to understand. This time, I didn't part the blinds. I just stood there, my forehead pressed against the cool glass, staring at the faint outline of his figure through the fabric. I closed my eyes, trying to clear my head, to push past the terror and think. What was the connection to room 13? The abandoned motel, the suicide, the call at 2 a.m. He had died alone, unheard, unhelped. Was he trapped there, in that room, unable to find peace? Was the key to room 13, the literal key, the only way to release him? The thought was audacious, insane. To go to an abandoned, possibly haunted motel in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m. To open a sealed room with a rusty key given to me by a spectral figure. It was the plot of a horror movie, not my life.
Yet, what other choice did I have? He wasn't going to leave me alone. He had followed me, and his message was clear. If I didn't act, he would continue to come back. Don't make me come back. He wasn't threatening me with a return. He was begging me not to force him to return to his tormented state. A deep, shuddering breath escaped my lips. The fear was still there, a cold, hard lump in my gut, but a strange resolve began to solidify around it. If this was his plea, if this was the only way to break this terrifying cycle, then I had to face it. I had to go. I had to complete the transaction he had initiated. I looked down at the key in my hand, then out at the faint silhouette outside. The bottle of water.
He hadn't drunk it. Had he given it to me, or did he want me to bring it somewhere? Bring it back to room 13, perhaps? To the place he had died? A final offering? A symbolic act of closure? The clock on the bedside table now read 2:05 a.m.
The initial terror of the phone call and his appearance had subsided into a grim determination. I needed to move. I needed to go back to the Red Owl, and then to the motel. This terrifying journey was only just beginning, and I, unwilling protagonist, was now bound to its chilling path. I slipped the key back into my pocket, its weight now feeling less like a burden and more like a tool. The silence stretched, but this time it felt less menacing, more like a pause before a pivotal act. I had to go. With a newfound, chilling resolve, I moved. The fear hadn't vanished.
Still bore the ghostly outline of Red Owl Moat. The number of the motel rooms were barely visible under years of grime and neglect. I cut the engine. The sudden silence was absolute, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the frantic pounding of my own heart. The air was cold, a bone-deep chill that seemed to seep directly from the decaying structure. My breath plumed in the frigid night. I stepped out of the truck, the crunch of gravel under my boots unnaturally loud. My eyes scanned the dark windows, imagining the empty, decaying rooms within. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the ancient building felt like a whispered warning. I clutched the bottle of water in my jacket pocket, its coolness a small, grounding presence. My gaze settled on the ground floor. The numbers were faded, but I found them, counting slowly. 10, 11, 12, and then, at the very end of the dilapidated corridor, a door more heavily boarded than the rest. It was sealed with several thick planks of wood, nailed haphazardly across it, and a rusted chain-link fence had been haphazardly strung across the entrance, as if to ward off not just vandals, but something far more potent. It was room 13. A shiver raked through me. This was it, the culmination of the nightmare. I approached the door, each step heavy, deliberate. The planks were old, weathered, but firmly attached. The chain, too, was rusted solid. There was no way to simply open it. This room wasn't just sealed, it was entombed. My mind raced. How could I get in? Was I supposed to force it open? The man hadn't given me a pry bar. He had given me a key for a lock that was clearly hidden or long gone. I ran my trembling fingers over the rough wood, searching desperately for a latch, a handle, anything. Nothing. Then my hand brushed against something beneath the loose, rotting frame of the door. A small, almost invisible gap where the wood had decayed away just enough to reveal a dark, rusty keyhole. It was ancient, almost swallowed by the crumbling frame, but undeniably there. It was obscured by grime and cobwebs, but it existed. The keyhole to room 13. I pulled my rusty iron key from my pocket. It felt impossibly heavy in my hand, its shape perfectly matching the outline of the hidden lock. My fingers trembled as I inserted it. It slid in smoothly, a perfect fit, a click resonating through the silent night as it settled into place. I turned it slowly, the ancient mechanism groaning in protest, a sound that seemed to echo through the entire motel. With a final, agonizing creak, the lock disengaged. The boards didn't fall. The chain didn't break. But the door, once sealed, now felt different. It was no longer bound.
A faint, almost imperceptible current of cold air, smelling faintly of old dust and something metallic, like the man himself, seeped from the crack around the frame. I pushed against the door, gently at first. It resisted, groaning. Then slowly, reluctantly, it swung inward, revealing a cavernous darkness within. The boards, still attached, simply moved with it, revealing that they were part of the door itself, not just an external barrier. The chain, too, followed, having been merely draped across, not truly securing it. The interior of room 13 was a tomb. It was utterly black, suffocatingly so, even with the faint moonlight filtering in from the shattered window. The air was thick and stagnant, heavy with the oppressive silence of decades. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a scene frozen in time, yet ravaged by decay. A single rusted bed frame lay against one wall, its mattress long since rotted away, leaving only springs and dust. A broken chair lay on its side,
Cobwebs draped every surface like tattered shrouds. But then, my light landed on something else. On the opposite wall, near the cracked window, a faint, almost invisible outline was etched into the plaster. A figure, barely discernible, a man, hanging. The remnants of a rope, frayed and dark with age, still clung to a hook in the ceiling above it. The air in the room grew impossibly colder, and a profound, aching sadness washed over me, a feeling of desolation so immense it stole my breath. And then I saw him, not the physical man from the gas station, but a translucent, shimmering outline standing by the window. His form was indistinct, wavering, like heat haze, but the impression was undeniable. He was looking at the outline on the wall, at himself. He wasn't menacing. He was simply there, trapped. I pulled the bottle of water from my pocket. It felt like an offering, a small token against an immense grief.
Với trembling hands, I unscrew the cap. The hiss of the plastic, a loud intrusion in the heavy silence. Với trembling hands, I unscrew the cap. The hiss of the plastic, a loud intrusion in the heavy silence. I walked towards the spectral figure, holding out the bottle. "This is for you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You called, I'm here." As I uttered the words, the shimmering figure seemed to flicker, to brighten slightly. He didn't take the water. Instead, his gaze, those empty hollows, seemed to rest on the bottle, then on me. A faint, almost imperceptible sigh, a sound like wind through dry leaves, seemed to emanate from his form. Then, slowly, the outline began to dissipate, to unravel like smoke in a breeze. It wasn't a violent vanishing, but a gentle fading, a peaceful dissolution. The figure became less defined, more transparent, until only a faint shimmer remained. Then nothing. The profound sadness in the room seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet, almost peaceful stillness. The air, though still cold, felt lighter.
I stood there, alone in the decaying room 13, the unopened bottle of water clutched in my hand. The rusty key felt light in my pocket now, its purpose seemingly fulfilled. Had I helped him? Had I freed him? I didn't know. But the oppressive weight that had settled on me since that night shift had undeniably eased. I placed the bottle of water on the sill of the cracked window, a final offering to a restless spirit. The sun would be rising soon, painting the world in colors of dawn. My long, terrifying night found its uneasy conclusion, but the echo of the man, the key, and room 13 would forever remain etched in my memory, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between worlds. The story of the man at the gas station at 2 a.m. was over. Or at least, this chapter of it was. And I, the reluctant protagonist, was finally free to leave.